Welcome to This Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're here with us today. We're going to dive into something I find just completely fascinating. We usually think of learning a language, especially English, as just cramming for a test, right? We memorize the vocab, we drill the grammar rules, and we basically just cross our fingers for exam day. Well, today we are completely flipping that script. We're going to look at how English can be transformed from a dry academic requirement into an actual real-world toolkit. We'll be walking through a totally brilliant case study, showing how a group of students used language, data, and a little bit of structure to make a massive impact on their community.
Okay, here is our quick roadmap for today's mission. First up, the Campus Cup crisis. Second, the idea framework. Third, pitching the pilot. Fourth, grammar for change. And finally, your turn to act. All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the Campus Cup crisis. Here is the reality at Mingde Senior High School.
So picture a really busy campus. Over at Mingde Senior High, a student named Iris and her team were staring down a super messy reality. Hundreds of recyclable cups were being bought every single week, but they were ending up totally contaminated with food waste in the trash. Now, as we follow Iris's team trying to clean this up, I want you to keep this one driving question in the back of your mind. How can English actually help us turn a small idea into real, tangible change? How do you take that raw desire to just fix something and translate it into a pitch that actually gets approved?
Well, when Iris's team first looked at the problem, their knee-jerk reaction was pretty dramatic. Their idea? Ban all disposable cups. And honestly, it sounds like the perfect silver bullet, doesn't it? Like, if the cups are the problem, just ban the cups. It's such a natural first reaction when we see an issue. We just want to instantly wipe it out. But, as they found out pretty quickly, sweeping mandates like that almost never work in the real world.
What's really fascinating here is how the team handled that initial failure. They ran a quick survey and realized a total ban was, well, practically impossible. Why? Because students are human. They literally just kept forgetting to bring their reusable bottles from home. On top of that, the nearest water refill stations were located super far from the main classrooms. But, and this is key, instead of getting mad or blaming people for being lazy, the team did something incredibly smart. They pivoted, and they decided to study the actual root of the problem.
Which brings us perfectly to Section 2, the idea framework. This is your toolkit for realistic problem solving. This framework is exactly how they pivoted from that failed ban to a solution that actually worked. It's a structured tool that basically takes the emotion out of a failure and replaces it with pure strategy. Real change happens in iterative steps, right? It's like a puzzle. So I stands for identify. You have to define the specific problem. D is for data, collecting real observations and actually listening to your stakeholders. E stands for explore, comparing safe, feasible options instead of jumping to extremes. And A is act and assess, running a small pilot and measuring what happens.
The data step they did was absolutely brilliant. They didn't just guess what was going wrong. They went out and got hard evidence. They spent 5 straight days literally counting cup waste. They sat down for a direct interview with the cafeteria manager to get the behind-the-scenes operational view. And they surveyed 120 students, specifically asking them, hey, what would actually make reuse easier for you? Gathering that multi-angled evidence completely changed the game for them.
So moving into the explore phase, they took all that data and came up with a highly feasible revised proposal, a borrow a cup station. It hit the nail right on the head because it solved the exact friction points they'd found. They'd provide washable cups for people who forgot theirs, charge a small deposit so they'd actually bring them back, and set up 2 super convenient return points so no one had to trek across campus. It wasn't an aggressive ban anymore. It was a smart system.
All right, Section 3, pitching the pilot. It is time for the boss battle.
Let's get to the climax of this whole story. The team was putting together a 2-minute pitch for an international exchange, but they had to get their own principal on board first. Now, they were smart. They proactively brought up the natural concerns about cost and hygiene. But even with a stellar pitch, the principal pumped the brakes on a massive school-wide launch. Instead, she suggested a pivot of her own, a focused 4-week pilot program partnering with just one single vendor. Honestly, they were probably a little disappointed at first, but they fully embraced that act and assess mindset. They updated the plan, added crystal clear cleaning rules, and set up weekly check-ins for the pilot.
And wow, did it pay off. The pilot was a huge, measurable success. Just by focusing on that one vendor for 4 weeks, they slashed disposable cup use at that location by a staggering 38%. I mean, that is massive. It totally proves that real change almost never starts with a perfect, widespread fix. It starts with listening, testing small, and tweaking things based on reality.
Moving right along to Section 4, Grammar for Change. Let's open up your language toolkit.
Because, having a brilliant idea is really only half the battle. Communicating it persuasively is what actually gets the green light. So let's look at the exact English toolkit Iris's team used. First up is an absolute foundation, the first conditional. It maps a present cause directly to a guaranteed future effect. If students return a cup, they will get the deposit back. This structure is absolutely crucial when you need to explain the mechanics of a system, like a deposit program, and clearly predict those outcomes for your stakeholders.
Next, you gotta balance your tone with your logic. It's a delicate dance between using modals and connectors. When you're pitching to someone in charge, like a principal, you want to use modals like should, could, or might. It softens your suggestions so you sound respectful, not bossy or demanding. On the flip side, connectors like because and therefore are your heavy lifters. They build that strong, logical backbone, directly linking your hard evidence to the outcomes you're proposing.
And if you really want to master the pitch, you have to anticipate the pushback. Using a phrase like "one concern is" shows so much maturity. Iris's team used this to bring up the cost and hygiene stuff before the principal even had a chance to ask. It proves to your stakeholders that you're not just wearing rose-colored glasses. You've looked at the risks and you respect their perspective enough to tackle the flaws head-on.
All right, we have arrived at Section 5, Your Turn to Act, the final challenge.
We've unpacked the crisis, we've walked through the idea framework, and we've decoded the grammar. Now it's your turn to bring this to your own community. Your final mission is to craft a 2-minute English pitch using this exact checklist. You're going to identify one safe, feasible problem. Back it up with at least 2 pieces of real, unexaggerated evidence. Name your stakeholders, propose a small pilot plan, address one valid concern using our target phrases, and clearly define exactly how you'll measure your success.
I want to leave you with this one final thought. Like we saw with that initial cup ban, change rarely ever starts with a perfect, flawless, massive solution. It starts with a small, tested idea. Now that you know English isn't just something you bubble in on a Scantron, but a literal megaphone for real-world impact, I have to ask, what small, messy, but absolutely brilliant idea are you going to start testing today? Thank you so much for hanging out with me for this explainer, and I seriously cannot wait to see what you all built.